So I'd like to share with you from the book of John. The book of John, chapter 8. The book of John, beginning in chapter 8 and verse 1. And however you read it, I will be reading it from the New International Version. And it reads as follows. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At dawn, he appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law of Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. Now what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who began to go away as they heard this, one at a time. The older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." Amen. What a mighty, mighty, merciful God we serve. This is a very, very interesting passage because so often we find ourselves focusing on the stone throwing. What's amazing about it is, I don't know about your great-grandmothers, but my mother used to use it as a way to keep me quiet. If your stuff ain't right, then you need to be quiet. But I'd like to take a look at this from a slightly different angle. And I'd like to invite you to pray with me on the subject of godly decisions. Godly decisions. One of the most famous poets of all times was a man who wrote a poem that I'm going to share with you momentarily. This man was born in San Francisco, moved to England, became very interested in reading and writing poetry during high school, and he was from Lawrence, Massachusetts. His father died, and they moved back to Boston with his grandparents, and he attended Lawrence High School, where he met his future love and wife, Eleanor White, who was his co-valedictorian. He was enrolled in Dartmouth College in 1892 and later attended Harvard, though he never finished. They tried several different endeavors, including poultry farming and a whole bunch of other things that were fairly unsuccessful. Despite these challenges, it was during this time that this particular artist, shall we call him, acclaimed himself to rural life and began to sort of rest in where God had placed him. And he wrote a few more things, but he couldn't find any publishers. For 40 years he remained an unknown, and it was believed that during this period he wrote the following poem. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent to the undergrowth. was fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for the passing there, had warned them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads to way, I doubted if I should come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Now, I didn't like that poem when I read it, and if you haven't read it, you will read it, because it's one of those rites of passage in American education. But that artist was none other than Robert Frost, one of the greatest poets to have ever lived. But it was in his struggle to find the right path for his life that the road not taken was conceived. You see, he was struggling just like us. When you think about your life, and I think about mine, and I thought about what I was doing when I was a child and in decision making, and part of it was, do I study? Do I play my music and do my homework? Or feel like I never see my friends? When will I have time to play? Then that time gives forth to playing sports. Do we play sports 3 seasons and study? Do we get a chance to take a break? If by playing 3 sports in 3 seasons, do I get a chance to pursue my personal arts and interests? Am I doing what God has called me to do? And then we get a little older and we find that we're trying to make decisions about where we work and how we work. And we say, well, do we take a job that pays more, but it requires 90% travel, road time, all the time it seems? Or do we take the job that's longer hours, but closer to home, but similarly would seem to take you away from your family? One of the big decisions of my life was whether I fulfill this childhood dream of mine of working in California. I always wanted to do it. Thought the Bay Area was one of the coolest places on earth. But I also had begun to see a young man about whom I was fairly serious. And that young man said to me, just for the record, I'm not going to San Francisco. So I had a decision to make. I had to decide whether I was going to take an opportunity, a risk, and go to San Francisco, where I had no job, didn't even really have a prospect of a job despite my interview, or was I going to stay on the East Coast with Brother Luke, get a job on the East Coast, and marry him, or risk, as we prepare to celebrate 20 years of marriage, not having that opportunity. See, we all have decisions to make. The question is, what is the most godly decision to make? Isn't this what Jesus faced? There's a funny thing about chapter 8, and I don't know if you caught it earlier, but chapter 8 begins with the word, but. Now, you and I all know that from English 101, we are not supposed to begin a sentence with the word but. But in this case, it is a partial sentence because you have to take a look back at chapter 7 to see what was really going on. You see, Jesus was going through. He was avoiding Galilee because the Jewish leaders were looking for a way to kill him. Can you imagine? You're trying to make decisions in the face of people looking for your life. Even his brothers didn't believe him. So he didn't want to go to this Jewish festival of tabernacles. And it's a festival that was much like Thanksgiving. It was a time to reflect on harvest and pilgrimage and the things that God had brought the Jewish people from. And it had been, it's a 3 times a year, and it's a festival of feast. And it was a good time. But he wouldn't go. But his brothers went, and people talked about him. You ever been somewhere where people are just talking about somebody so bad? And you have to stand in and you say, but he's a good man. He's a good man. They argued over whether he was demon-possessed, if that was the reason why he was able to help people in the way that he did. He said, my teachings are from God. But they didn't believe him. And then we find ourselves in chapter 7. This adulterous woman was just the opportunity that they thought that they had to trap Jesus. Which law would he break, they thought? Which law would allow them to jump at him? But instead, Christ neither found fault with the law, nor did he excuse the behavior. He didn't either give credence to the pretend zeal that they brought. I mean, can you imagine? In my spiritual imagination, as Reverend Christ refers to it, I'm thinking about a crew of people. And this is like a street fight. They're standing there and they're all encircling this woman. They drag this woman out. You gotta imagine. They probably dragged her out, clothes all messed up, hair all messed up. Probably just dragged her out where she was. So you gotta figure she's looking bad. She's feeling bad. She's embarrassed. But you know, we're like sharks when blood is around. It's like, ooh, a train wreck, a fight. You ever notice when something is going down, somebody says something like, ooh, something stinks, and instead of going the way we go, where? I don't smell that. Everybody wanted to know what was going to happen. You know, this is the Channel 7 activity of biblical times. You can imagine that the truck from Channel 7 has rolled in, and the newscaster is standing. We're waiting to see the decision that Jesus will come to. We expect a decision any minute now. And the crowds are yelling, and you know, you gotta imagine somebody turn over a chariot and a fire, and everybody's all excited about what Jesus is going to do. Because you know, as Channel 7, you watch it, you pay attention to it. If it bleeds, it leads. If it's salacious, everybody wants to know. If it's about to be bad, everybody wants to know. If it's about to be on, everybody wants to know. And everybody is watching, trying to figure out what Jesus